I'm Haley from Gallifrey Public Radio, a Doctor Who fandom podcast and part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Start with your tone.
Are you telling me you built a time machine?
There is no screen.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Well, let me finish them, please.
I only have one rule. Everyone fights, no one quits.
Welcome back to the Sci-Fi Sunday podcast version 2.0. I'm your host, David S. Dawson, and tonight for the almost final countdown episode to the Rise of Skywalker, I'm joined with Mike Peterson.
What's up?
And Bryan Davis.
Yo, yo.
And Mike, you're still in Florida, right?
Yes, I am.
So before we get into anything else, you've written
yes,
Rise of the Resistance.
Oh my God.
Don't spoil it, but
I'm not going to.
I'm assuming by the reaction you're giving us right now that it's the bee's knees.
It is quite possibly the best ride experience is the best word I'm going to come up with this. It's not just one ride. It breaks up into three parts where you're doing different things along the different paths. But it is literally like nothing has ever been made before. And everyone's like, I've had a couple people like, okay, so where does this compare? You know, like, is this your favorite ride? I'm like, I can't compare it to anything. It's not a roller coaster. It's not just a show. It's a mix between the two. So it makes it really hard.
Well, like Disney technically classifies it as a dark ride, a la Peter Pan and Roger Rabbit's Sit and Spin or whatever. But it's like
it's
that
so much more.
Right?
Absolutely, yeah. I just can't get over how freaking cool it is. Yeah, I can't wait to go. I can't wait to go with you guys and see your reactions on this. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Unfortunately, it sounds like it may open here in California while I'm on the road. So we'll see how quickly I get.
It's interesting. So Hollywood Studios did the whole reservation system here, which they haven't really needed to do that much at Disneyland versus that first month during the whole reservation for just getting in. But even Millennium Falcon didn't need a res after a little bit. But we were there. The park didn't open until 9:00. We were there at 6:30 in the morning to get there. And you saw my Instagram of already the sea of people waiting to get in line and get in there. So once you got into the park, that's when you can and scan your ticket in. That's when you can make a reservation. So it's complete by chance. They were sold out of reservations for the day by 8:00 in the morning. So it was awesome. So worth it.
Well, I'm glad one of us has had the chance to ride it early and report a little bit back. We of course will do a full breakdown of the ride after all of us have had a chance to ride it.
Yep.
And give everybody our input on that. Before we get into the episode, just want to remind everybody that we are a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network at GonnaGeek.com. Be sure to go and check out GonnaGeek.com for more incredibly geeky podcasts like our own. You'll enjoy everything that you'll find over there at our network. And now we will launch right into the first film in the sequel saga, The Force Awakens from director J.J. Abrams. Before we get into it all, I just want to say that I personally am a fan of this film. I really enjoy it.
The more times I watch it, the better it gets.
Yeah, I feel that way too. when I first saw it, I really had the feeling a lot of people had that it was just A New Hope redone. But as I watch it, I see all the other stuff, more and more, and I really like this one.
Cool. So that said, we're going to be going into it. We're not, we're all critical filmmakers, so we are pretty good at nitpicking things to death anyway, but this is not we're going to hate on The Force Awakens podcast. If you want to, if you want a hate on stuff, show, go find some other outlet. We're going to talk about the film itself and the things that we like about it. We will talk about things that we don't like about it, but I think by and large, you'll have a positive experience with this podcast. And we will launch into it with the scroll. We talk about the scrolls every episode. Finally, an exciting scroll. Like this scroll, I think is just, it's filled with like exciting words in it. And we're back, we're back in a war footing, right? Like a real war footing. And, I just think it's infinitely more exciting than any of the prequel crawls, for sure.
Yeah. Some of the prequel crawls, you're still like, what exactly? I still don't understand. I just read it.
Some of the prequel crawls feel like you got to sit through a poli-sci class to understand them.
Yeah.
I'm still sometimes a little confused about, obviously you know what the First Order is, but then it's like, okay, well you have the New Republic and then you have the Resistance. Like, wait, aren't those the same thing? Like what, like that always like got me a little bit.
No, the New Republic is the government.
Mm-hmm.
And this gets into a bunch of, the canon.
It's like the government before the Empire.
The New Republic is the government. And yes, they're very similar to the Old Republic, right? But they don't.
And the Senate and all that, right?
Yes, exactly. There's a Senate, there's a chancellor, there's the whole bit. The Resistance is Leia's military group that she created herself to battle against the rising First Order, of which the New Republic wanted to try and just ignore and appease. Does that make sense?
Okay. Because it's the same thing, honestly, like the rebellion, right? Like where you can't really acknowledge that you're there to help support the Senate, but at the same time, like you're still being secretly employed by them, and the Resistance is there to help. Is there.
Yeah. So there is a bit of shortcutting in telling the story here, and that they don't tell you what's going on with the New Republic necessarily. But I don't think any of that is super important to telling the particular story that they're telling in this movie, other than Leia is running the Resistance, battling against the rising power of the First Order.
Yep.
I think that they learned that from the prequels, and especially Phantom Menace, when they tried to get so into the poli-sci part of it that people kind of lost it. They're like, yeah, we're not going to really explain too much. We'll just take us at our word. This is how it is, and let's just go.
Well, and I think it gets back down to, if you really want that deep dive, you can go read the novels. And a lot of this stuff's covered in the novels, and set up in the novels, especially Leia's stuff. If you read the Leia novels, specifically the one called Bloodline, where the word gets out that Vader's her father, and she becomes shunned politically. That really kind of sets up where she's at in this movie, because she has no political clout anymore.
Right.
But she's still a leader. And for people who are looking for, a rising resistance to the growth of the First Order, there is no better choice than her, because she is, the hero of the rebellion. So her military clout remains, but her political clout has diminished over time. So
got it.
Yeah, so that's a little backstory.
That's good. That's good.
Like I said, I don't think you need all that necessarily to enjoy the film, but you know, when you like to take the deep dives, the information is there. You can find it.
Yeah.
I love the opening of this movie. I like the kind of shadowy Star Destroyer and and then that drop down to the planet with all the troopers. I mean, the troopers look so cool inside the dropship with the lights flickering. And,
yep.
I remember seeing that shot in the trailers and just going, damn, this is going to be a whole like new thing. And it looks amazing.
Yeah, I've always loved obviously the look of Stormtrooper, but they even do a better job with it with the First Order version.
It's sleeker, and I like that it's not it's not a like complete departure from the original Stormtrooper look. It's an evolution of it, which I appreciate. Pretty much across the board, all of the various trooper designs that you see in this film, and there are a few. They're all evolution of what came before, which I appreciated. Because the First Order is not the Empire, but it did rise from the remnants of the Empire, especially if you get into the books like the Aftermath novels, right. And you see where they kind of originate from. So it's cool to see, you know, hey, yeah, 20-something years later, of course those designs would change a little bit.
Right.
It's exact same because it wasn't the prequels are 30 years before New Hope, right? And then this is 30 years after. Is that about where my time frame is?
Give or take 5 or 6 years, you know, but yeah. But yeah, so you saw slow little changes in the ships and the prequels, and of course you would see that now. Mm-hmm. Is that your cat, Bryan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I heard that too.
If you hear purring on the podcast, that's Dante. That's Bryan's cat. And he must be sitting in his lap right now.
Yeah, he's walking all around me.
So the stormtroopers go down to the village where Poe's been sent to kind of hunt down and seek this map to find Luke Skywalker. And he's meeting with somebody. I don't remember the character's name, but it's played by acting royalty, Max von Sydow, which is really cool. Carrying on a long tradition of Star Wars, bringing in great older actors to play these kind of noble elder characters. And the stormtroopers attack. And I don't know about you guys, but this for me feels like the first time in the entire series where the stormtroopers attacking something actually feels dangerous.
Yeah.
They actually hit their mark.
They're hitting marks. They're killing people. They're kind of brutal about what they're doing, and they seem to be very efficient, which by and large, they don't come across as in a lot of the Star Wars movies.
Yeah. Well, this is also, I think, the darkest scene yet of any Star Wars. I mean, as far as like physical light and shadows, it really, even like nighttime scenes from any of the other episodes, you know, had a fair amount of moonlight, and it was Hollywood nighttime lighting and stuff. And this was like, it felt like it was shot with just the regular natural light. It was really cool.
And it very much felt like, hey, we're setting you up. This is a new era for Star Wars where like things are a little different from what you remember. Stormtroopers can actually hit stuff and they'll actually kill people. And I think that I just enjoy this whole opening sequence all the way around. And we get introduced to BB-8.
Yep.
And it struck me watching the film last night. I mean, I really got it watching The Last Jedi anyway, but it struck me watching the film today that Poe's relationship with BB-8 is way more like a master and his dog.
Oh, completely.
Right? Yeah. Luke always had a relationship, and Anakin had a relationship with Artoo that was friendly, and they came across more like friends, but not so much like, oh, he's my little pet, you know. And BB-8 just really comes across as Poe Dameron's, you know, orange lab, you know.
He seems to have even more personality than R2, and you know, because he has more mobility and expressions, essentially, that he seemed more expressionful. Is that a word?
Yeah. Teresa mentioned one of the podcasts a while back that the difference between R2 and BB-8 is, as much as anything, the ability to tilt the head of BB-8 to create expression.
Yeah.
Which, you know, R2 can tilt forward and can kind of tilt back, but can't really tilt side to side, right? And BB-8's able to do all these maneuvers with his head that creates the sense of, you know, way more expression than what you could get with R2.
Yeah.
And kind of fun, you know.
It's interesting. I always thought I liked R2 more because I just liked how sarcastic he is as a bot. And again, same thing when you look back, like, okay, there's only so much you can do, obviously, with a tin can of a body. But I'm like, oh yeah, BB-8's cute. But then I watched this again, this just, you know, a couple of days ago. I'm like, okay, yeah, he actually is growing on me more because he has that little ability to do that much more. And because, like you said, he is way more master. I always thought he was like same thing, same kind of dog personality who just cares for his master that much more. We're relatable.
Yeah.
And his voice sounds more organic than R2's. R2's was a great electronic, melody that could express emotions, but it just sounded to me that BB-8 was more animalistic almost than just electronic.
Well, he purrs at one point.
Yeah, he purrs, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But R2 has those kind of cooing sounds.
But it's still,
But he also had predominantly more the kind of the beeps and the tones as opposed to the what type sounds, you know. So the vocalizations sound more digital on R2 than they do on BB-8.
More synthesized.
Which I think does also allow for a bit more expression with BB-8 than you get with R2.
Yeah.
So couple of big things kind of happen in this whole sequence. We get introduced to Kylo Ren as he comes down onto planet. We're also introduced to FN-2187, who we later become known as Finn. I love the sequence with the blood on his helmet. The bloody handprint on his helmet, and his buddy dies, and that rattles him.
Yep.
Well, we don't see very much humanoid blood in any of the episodes. We see, you know, alien blood here and there, but even not a whole lot of that, it seemed. So to see, I think, you know, humanoid, actual red blood in that kind of situation used, I think, was also very graphic and very different tone than what we've had.
Well, and it's it's so stark against the white of the Stormtrooper helmet.
Yeah.
Right. I think we mentioned it like in like A New Hope with a severed arm at the cantina, and then with the Wampa, but same thing. Like it's just
very few times that you see blood in Star Wars.
Yeah.
But none of the prequels.
Yeah, no, I can't think of any time I saw.
No, even when Anakin's legs and arm get chopped off, there's no blood.
Yeah, just scarred flesh.
You know, because I mean, in canon storytelling, they made the decision that lightsabers instantly cauterize wounds.
Cauterize,
yeah.
Which, you know, give or take whether that could be true or not, but but it is interesting to see the blood on Finn's helmet, and we mentioned this last episode when we talked about performing with a helmet on, And David Prowse did this great job of showing emotion, right? There's a lot of emotion on Finn without us knowing the character yet. We don't know John Boyega's character at all yet. He's just a quote unquote faceless stormtrooper like the rest of them, but he stands out because of this streaked bloody handprint on his helmet. And from that moment on, you can see how different his stormtrooper is from the rest, which I think is really a fascinating thing to see in acting behind a mask.
Absolutely.
So cool. Moving on.
I agree.
And we also have Kylo Ren in this sequence, who is also performing from behind a mask. And I love the exchange between him and Poe.
Oh my God, that's so great.
And his mask, it like the stormtroopers, it's an evolution. It's like you recognize it, and you recognize that it could be, a Darth Vader-esque kind of tribute mask almost. But you're like, not quite sure what it represents. So it's really cool.
And it's not it's not as bulky as Vader's mask.
No. Yeah, it's more sleek and with the silver that Vader's mask didn't have any of. Well, he had the front grill, but to have like the around the eyes kind of silver was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was going to really like this movie as soon as this happens with Kylo and Poe. I love Poe's character and just how cocky and sarcastic he is. Wait, you talked first or I talked? How does this work? Like, I was busting up in the theaters when that happened.
Yeah.
And the blaster shot frozen in midair.
That was badass.
Something we'd never seen before.
Nope.
Yeah, so I mean, in just a matter of a few moments, you get all these character beats, right? Kylo Ren is extremely powerful with the Force, right? Because we've never seen somebody stop a blaster bolt in midair before.
Mm-hmm.
Poe Dameron is irreverent and cocky and obviously knows how to kind of handle himself in tense situations, right? And then it's all followed with Kylo Ren ordering all the villagers to be killed. And the stormtroopers immediately turn and start firing on everybody. That's super dark.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like pew pew, they start shooting and the camera moves away. Like, you get to sit and listen to them slaughtering this village for a little while you watch Finn kind of coping with the fallout of that emotionally himself. Again, being seen through a mask. Really well performed, I thought.
Yeah, that was really good. Very brutal, very militaristic. More so than that we've seen, besides just stormtroopers marching in file. This was very Nazis.
Yeah, totally. After Poe gets captured, we get introduced to Rey. And I've said it a number of times in the course of this countdown, but Star Wars excels when they play with scale, right? Mm-hmm. And Rey, who is arguably the most important character in the new trilogy, is introduced in the most brilliant fashion, where she's the tiny, tiny little person inside the guts of a Star Destroyer. Then she's the tiny person outside the wreck of the Star Destroyer. And then we get these really wide angle shots of her cruising across the desert with enormous Star Destroyer wreckage all around her. And she's just teeny tiny, like the whole time. Which I think does an incredible job of like establishing that this girl is small. She's grown up somewhere where something major happened on her planet, and she's just kind of existing there. You know, there's nothing special about her at this point. All established in just a matter of like 30 to 45 seconds of screen time, which I think is really, it's impressive, compact storytelling.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, she seems so tiny, so unimportant.
Yeah, and then they follow that with her cleaning parts that she's scavenged and watching this incredibly old, leathery-faced lady doing the same thing. And we're instantly shown that Rey's current destiny is just bleak. Like, there's nothing to look forward to in her life except more of the same.
Yep.
I think incredibly well told, without saying a word about her history there, you know? It's all done just through the visuals.
Yep.
And that, you know, she has to scavenge to trade for food is also telling something too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, you got this part, it's worth 1/4 portion. And then you go to her makeshift home inside the foot of an AT-AT.
And her living space. Her living space, like, it's like sad, but like also shows that she's like a survivor and incredibly resourceful, you know?
Yeah. And then, she makes those marks on the inside, which, you know, she's been counting for something for a really long time. And I just like that entire, like, okay, she's got a doll here. So she's obviously been here a really long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she has little pieces of scrap here and there that she's found, the helmet. And then she hears BB-8's call. And she rescues BB-8 from another scavenger.
Well, and I like that sequence too, because it also shows that she speaks multiple languages.
Yep.
So she's also kind of smart, you know, or at least really adaptable to her surroundings. And she stands up to this guy, like easily stands up to him, and like he backs off, which shows that, like, at least amongst the scavengers around town, she's got some respect, you know?
Exactly. And she treats BB-8 with respect too. She just kind of like, for one, I mean, the fact that she's going up and trying to stop the scavenger from taking him as if he was an animal, as if he was a sentient being, and she's trying to protect him, and she just treats him with respect. And
that's a really interesting point, because in Star Wars, droids are oftentimes treated as like nothing citizens.
Yep. Yeah, she treats him like almost like Poe treats him.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, BB-8 endears himself to her, and the two of them walk off into the sunset, if you will, together.
Right.
Roll off in the sunset.
This is the start of a beautiful friendship. And then we get back to Kylo Ren, who's interrogating Poe. I thought the whole sequence of interrogating, both interrogation sequences in this movie, I think are really intense. And very well performed by all the actors involved. And just the idea that Kylo Ren is like using the Force to kind of push his way into Poe's mind. That's just like a crazy idea. And it looks painful, and it looks, you know, super abusive. And you really kind of feel like Poe's in a lot of danger.
Well, it's a twist of the Jedi mind trick, right? Which simple little thing versus on the weak-minded. But against someone who is strong-willed, that the Force can actually go through it, actually.
Yeah.
Whether it's dark side Force or whatever, but it's a different take on that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just something else we haven't seen, that really exciting new developments in the Force, or in the Star Wars universe, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So then Rey's waiting for her family to return. We get kind of introduced to that idea. And she's also offered a ton of food to sell BB-8 to Unkar Plot.
Yeah.
But she refuses. And I think, again, in the expedition of telling this girl's backstory, we see that she's respectful. She's got integrity, because she won't sell BB-8, even as hungry as she might be. She won't sell BB-8 because she knows that's not really, he's not hers to sell, you know?
Right. Exactly.
And
he's not property. He is like a pet. It's different than just
she treats him as a sentient being. She treats him as, he's looking for his master, and she's trying to help, and even though she gets this opportunity, she doesn't turn her back on him. Which says a lot for Rey, especially again in the Star Wars universe where people typically treat droids like crap. Oh, hello. Hello?
Sorry, it was an alarm.
No worries. Let's see. I wrote sketchy trooper who was rattled in battle. Oh, FN2187. So now we're up on the ship. Phasma's talking to FN2187. He's kind of wandered off. He's thinking through his stuff, and he takes his helmet off. Had we ever seen a stormtrooper take his helmet off before? I mean, clone troopers did a little bit in the prequels, but actual stormtroopers in the original trilogy?
No, we never saw a real stormtrooper face. Not that I can remember.
No, even the pilots and everything with their big black helmets, they always had them on, even when they're just walking around the Death Star and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So interesting to see FN2187 take off his helmet. He's obviously rattled. And I wrote a couple things. I was like, FN2187, is that his only name? Is he a clone? Is he something else? I mean, there were a lot of questions I remember when I first watched the movie at this point. So a number of questions posed right away, with this character, in his interactions with Phasma, who looks badass, by the way.
Yeah.
Captain Phasma looks awesome. That shiny chrome outfit is pretty cool.
I can only imagine the costume designer or set, on set, after one take of shooting, okay, run up, shine it off real quick, next take, do it again.
Well, I mean, they've had to do that with Threepio for years too. So
yeah, that's true.
Yep. I also think it's interesting that they established that Kylo Ren immediately knows that it's FN2187 who's like run off with Poe.
Exactly.
He doesn't need anybody to actually tell him that. He just knows. Because it gets back to a bit on the village where he looked at Finn, who wasn't shooting anybody when he said kill everybody.
Exactly. So that to me it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of what's the word I'm looking for?
There's not a lot of dissent in the ranks.
Yes, exactly. Everybody falls in. Like you said, they've been since birth. They've been trained for this. So to have somebody do something and then some later on, it's like, it's probably that same guy, because I don't see two people being as bold.
Yeah. Well, I actually wrote a note. I said Kylo and Hux bickering is incredibly interesting. But Hux explaining that troopers are conditioned from birth is a really interesting point, because essentially the First Order is building troopers in the way that Jedi used to build up Jedi. They would grab people very, very young and then train them to be something their entire life. So it's kind of it's a distorting of the honorable upbringings that Jedi were doing by raising an army.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to creating clones and doing that. They just straight up took these children when they were young and started training them to be soldiers. And at the same time that they're having that discussion about them raising them and turning them into soldiers, Finn is shedding his armor through the Jakku desert, which is, I think, a really nice bit of symbolism of him kind of being reborn in the deserts of Jakku.
Yeah.
I love the escape space battle and the interaction between Poe and Finn. You can kind of see that, okay, these guys are going to be buddies for a little bit. It's going to be fun. And even though that Finn has been trained to be a stormtrooper his entire life, he's been trained to use a blaster. Because he doesn't know how to he doesn't know how to do anything in the ship. And Poe has to give him the Cliff Notes version of how to do that real quick. And during their interaction, you know, he shoots some stuff down, but then while they're just having a fun conversation, oh shoot, I forgot about these missiles, and down.
I like the interaction between the two of them, and in fact, it's one of my big notes for The Force Awakens is that there's just a lot of fun in this movie. The characters enjoy themselves. They get excited. They aren't the stoic Jedi of the prequels, and they're not the kind of when you get to the original trilogy, Luke is enthusiastic about things. Leia's mostly sarcastic most of the time. Han's pretty sarcastic most of the time. But in these movies, everybody has their time where they're just kind of happy and joyful, and I think that's a really interesting aspect that is missing in some of the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, definitely.
I forgot how much action there is in this film.
Oh, I was having a hard time writing notes because it just keeps moving. I said to Bryan at one point, I'm like, it just keeps moving.
It's so quick, and I think that was something that was missing from a lot of the other films.
Well, the original trilogy was really fast for its time. So I think that's a hard criticism to put on the original trilogy because it kind of established this move to faster editing, faster action, faster everything. But certainly when you get to the prequels, man, there is a lot of just really slow storytelling in the prequels. Those movies can drag at times. This movie really avoids dragging.
Yeah, even though you're 30 years after Return, you still kind of know the backstory, the general backstory of what's going on, right? That's what the originals set up. You have, the scroll and stuff like that to really set this off. And obviously you have little key scenes in here that are coming up. But it can be just let's just throw you right into it movie.
Yeah, it really does. It just kind of drops you into this, hey, Luke's missing and everybody's trying to find him. And off we go.
Exactly.
Pick up some people along the way and here we go. But yeah, so Finn eventually makes his way to the market where he encounters Rey, who is fighting off two thugs in the market. And I think this is a really important scene that a lot of people don't remember, right? Before Finn and Rey go running off together, Finn's first encounter with Rey is literally watching her with her bow staff, kicking 2 or 3 guys' asses to protect BB-8, right?
Yeah.
Completely taking care of herself and knocking these 3 thugs off, knocking them down and moving on, right? And then BB-8 recognizes Poe's jacket on Finn, and what does Rey do? She chases the stormtrooper down and knocks him on his ass, right?
Yeah.
Rey is a completely capable individual at this point who has some fighting skills already in her from growing up on the rough streets of Jakku.
Yep.
Right.
And she's capable of fighting with a staff weapon already. So there is some establishment of this girl having some capabilities in those weapons departments, those fighting departments that come in later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've said this when we watched Last Jedi, but her fighting style for her lightsaber at the very end of this movie is very jab and like big throws that you would be a bow staff style of. It's not a sword style at all.
Yeah, it's a blunt instrument fighting style.
Yeah, when she's fighting Kylo Ren in the snow, she's lots of stabs, lots of deep lunges,
which is a bow staff type of style. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really enjoyed her excitement at encountering the Resistance, and the comment that the droid's carrying a map to Luke Skywalker. She's like, I thought that Luke Skywalker's a myth.
Yeah.
I thought that was a wonderful idea to introduce in this film because the galaxy's huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when Luke did his stuff at the Battle of Yavin and again at the Battle of Endor, he was a small part of a larger picture of battles that were going on. And there hadn't been Jedi in the galaxy in any sort of great numbers already at that point for like 30 years. Now we're talking another 20 or something years later. So you're talking 50 something years since the Jedi actually existed, right?
Mm-hmm.
With this one little blip of Luke Skywalker kind of creeping up in the middle of some battles when the rebels defeated the Empire. But if you're living on an outer world like Jakku, those stories are, how distorted are those stories by the time they get there, and how much is it filtered by the kind of political nuance of living on an outer world that doesn't follow the New Republic and really didn't follow the Empire either. How much of the idea that there was a Jedi helping the rebellion defeat the Empire is just like, oh, that's political nonsense. That's just trying to get people to believe things. We see a lot of that even today. There's a stretch of people that don't believe in the Holocaust, right?
Yeah.
70 years ago, 80 years ago. It was a really interesting piece of storytelling, I thought, to bring into the Star Wars universe. This idea that Luke Skywalker exists mostly in myth for most people.
Absolutely. Because it's news, it's propaganda, it's the big telephone game that goes across the universe as it goes along. So who knows what has happened, or even if anything, even any news has even happened in general in a lot of these places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's great. I think it's a great piece of storytelling. Finn is also very excitable. We discover through this whole sequence, keeps grabbing Rey's hand and running with her. And
again, this goes with that. She can take care of herself. She's like, stop grabbing my hand. I can run myself.
But I think it gets back a little bit to when he was leaving the Star Destroyer with Poe, and he was saying, keep it together, or whatever, and Poe's like, I'm fine. He's like, I'm not talking to you. I think Finn he's very excitable, and I think he's also very anxious. And I think he latches on to these two people because they're the only two people he's encountered outside of that First Order life, And I think he grabs onto them both as kind of like anchors to like they're his whoopee, if you will.
Right.
And I think it's a lot of fun to just kind of watch Rey like looking at him like, why do you keep grabbing my hand?
I love here's a character who's been brought up to be a ruthless stormtrooper, obey everything, has this natural just tendency to protect someone.
Yeah.
In that case, it's Rey. And it's a woman in distress, so he goes to help. He's like, then he stops. He's like, okay, this girl can take care of herself. But it's just so interesting. Like, you wouldn't think a stormtrooper would do that.
Well, he's not a good stormtrooper.
Yeah, but that's my point. That's my point, though, right?
His humanity managed to overcome the training.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And I like how they turn the tables after the TIE fighters kind of blow them up. Rey sits up and kind of wakes him up. He's like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And then she holds her hand out for him. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's a great little piece of character interaction. We also get reintroduced to the Falcon here. How did you guys feel about the introduction of the Falcon?
That was awesome. I love it when she mentions it before you see it, and
that one's garbage.
Yeah,
just completely unexpected, right? You're like, oh, that's because you see it from the trailers, right? You see him flying the Falcon, but never is, Chewie or Han anywhere in the scene. So you're always like, okay, so how do they get their hands on it?
Yeah.
And now you know.
Yeah, I like how they're running to a nicely painted, fancy ship, and it gets blown up, and then the camera does that whip pan around, and there's the Falcon underneath tarps and stuff.
Yeah. And it's so much bigger than the ship that they just hit, and I'm like, why are they not trying to shoot at the... yeah, probably because they don't think it's an issue.
Yeah, it's under the tarps. They weren't running towards the Falcon at that point, so... I love the action sequence here. I don't know that we have to get into a whole lot of discussion about it. I think it is fun. It's fast. It's kind of everything that the original trilogy was to the audiences in the 70s. I felt like this did that for the new audiences today. Brought the Falcon into a high-speed chase and did incredible things.
I love when they're both getting into their positions. She clearly knows her way around ships because she's a junker, right? So she's scavenged forever. So she knows the way around a ship and what each piece does. But, they each get in their position and they're both like, I can do this. I can do this. I'm like, it's like, that's just great writing and just coincidence, right? Like, okay, she knows her stuff, but does she really know her stuff? Like, okay, so she can't really quite fly something yet. We don't know what her experience is, and you can see it's super wobbly as it's flying, but it's still done very well.
Well, and she doesn't fly it perfectly, which I like.
Right? Yeah,
she's scraping the sand. She's banging off the walls of the Star Destroyers a bit. I appreciate that. I appreciate that she doesn't fly it perfectly. Look, there's a lot of people out there who call her a Mary Sue, that she's perfect at everything, that she does everything, flawlessly. But I mean, if you're really paying attention, like, they're lucky they got through that scrape, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, it's luck and a bit of the Force, right? And the fact that the Falcon's just a beefy, bulky ship that can
and she's never flown it, so she doesn't know how big it is and exactly, and where, how close am I to that side?
Yep.
Yeah, well, it kept flying real heavy to one side.
Yeah.
Right? Which I thought was a nice touch.
You're not at the center of the when you fly the plane.
Yeah, you're off to the side, right? She does kind of yell at Finn at one point, like, this would be easier with a co-pilot. I think that's when he was telling her to get the shields up. So, but
yeah, she reaches real far across the dash.
Yeah. But I enjoy the sequence, and as we stated before, characters being able to fly ships in high tense situations that they've never flown before is a Star Wars tradition.
Yep, absolutely.
Luke did it right away in A New Hope. So, I thoroughly enjoyed the two of them when they finally get into space and how excited they are about their escape. And, you know, she's like, I've never flown into space before. And he's like, I've never shot, you know, and the two of them were just so full of joy. Again, I love the joy in this movie.
Completely.
And then that's balanced out with Kylo's temper tantrum.
Oh my God. That was
I turned to David and I'm like, oh, well, there goes Netflix for the entire Star Destroyer. Because there's like, yeah, you're right. I mean, he's not in the control room or, you know, on the bridge or something like that. So it can't be that important of a piece that he just destroyed. But I was trying to think of.
It's a great scene to go, wow, this guy's got some serious issues. Later on, that's when it becomes really comedic.
Well, and I feel like if Ben Solo's trajectory is that he's the tortured soul a la Anakin was in the prequels, you know, Hayden Christensen complained that he wasn't allowed to let loose with the anger very often, you know. Everything was always really held back and reserved. They go completely the opposite direction with Kylo. It's like, hey, you want to throw a temper tantrum? Just fuck shit up, man. Go for it. You know? And I think that makes him feel more dangerous, you know, because he's unhinged and undisciplined, because that's not the act of a disciplined person.
Yeah,
you know,
no, definitely not.
That's the act of a lunatic, you know, to tear up the console like that.
Well, it's interesting too. It's like, because even with Vader, right? Like, if the admirals had to confront him, they were nervous, but it wasn't like, you know, people looked at him and they were just very cautious of it. When this poor soul had to come up and tell Kylo that they lost the girl and the BB unit, he is clenching the hat. He is terrified to death. And that's a different look that you quite haven't seen from the officers around the Sith Lords.
Yeah, well, in the end, you know, Vader, as terrifying as he could be, and the fact that he did kill people occasionally with a Force choke, but you know, oftentimes Vader had someone like Tarkin around who would bark orders at him to step down, you know? So he didn't come across as unhinged. Like, if Vader decided to force choke you, he was making a calculated decision to promote somebody else in your place.
Absolutely.
Kylo Ren just comes across as being off his rocker and slightly mad. Which I think is a interesting place to put your villain, where he's feared even by his own people because nobody knows what to expect out of him. Like, you knew what to expect out of Vader. Like, you pushed him far enough, he'll choke you. Okay, I get that, you know? But he didn't always kill you when he choked you either, you know? So Kylo Ren whipping his lightsaber out and just fucking shit up is, I mean, that's terrifying.
Sorry, Dave, turn your mic down some more, or maybe back up just a little bit. Yeah, you're peaking again.
I probably got close.
Cool.
I wrote Finn and BB-8 on the Millennium Falcon when Rey's down fixing stuff and Finn's trying to convince BB-8 to share the base information with her.
To look back and forth.
This is where BB-8 really kind of settled in for me as a character I could love.
Yeah.
The whole way he's looking at her, he's looking at him, he's kind of surprised, he's kind of incredulous, you know, and then it caps it off with the little torch thumbs up.
See, I always saw that as a middle finger. I never saw that as a thumbs up. I always saw it as a middle finger.
I think that speaks more to you, Bryan, than to BB-8.
Because BB-8's like, are you kidding? I'm not. What? And he's like, thumbs up, and he's like, But yeah, I always thought it was a middle finger.
I remember I was seeing that in theaters, and all of us just cracking up after the thumbs up. The entire theater did.
Yep. And again, it's fun, right? It's just fun. And then we have the reintroduction of Han Solo and Chewbacca, with the famous "Chewie, we're home" line. How did that hit you guys? Bryan, let's start with you, because you're the oldest one of the three of us, B. So, how did the return of Han Solo feel for you?
It was great. It was very nostalgic, being there. Because you weren't sure how far in the future is this? What has become of Han Solo? If the Millennium Falcon's been sitting under tarps for years, no telling, where Han Solo might be. So to see him and Chewie back, and it was very, very cool, I thought.
Same thing for me. It's the smile that he gets when he goes to the bridge, or the cockpit, and just looking around, and it's actual joy coming out of Harrison Ford. And it was just really good. But you really see how old that man has got in 30 years.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I thought I wrote in my notes, Solo in cockpit of Falcon is great fan service. To have that singular moment alone with Han Solo in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, I think is something fans had been hoping to see for a long time. It was great to see it. And I really liked Harrison Ford's reaction to hearing Luke's name in this sequence. He does such a great job of, it's touching the way he kind of pauses and thinks about it, but also his response hints at a lot of sadness. And I actually said to Bryan at this point, I was like, Harrison Ford never wanted to play Han Solo again. He'd said that for years, but thank God that he did, because quite frankly, I thought his performance in The Force Awakens is some of the best on-screen acting Harrison Ford has done in ages. And right from the start, this whole sequence where he returns to the Millennium Falcon is played so pitch perfectly. My hat's off to Harrison Ford for coming back to do the role one final time, and for actually, at least on screen, looking like he gave a shit enough to put in a decent performance for the audience. It was really nice to see.
Yeah, definitely. Very nostalgic. But he's been doing great. Or he was doing great in this film.
So we get into the whole Rathtar discussion, and Reyes doesn't know what a Rathtar is, and Finn keeps alluding to it's good that you don't know. And there's just little things. I always love little kind of off the cuff comments, things that sound really natural when actors deliver them correctly. And at one point, Finn asks Han Solo, how did you get all these Rathtars on board? And Han Solo just goes, used to have a bigger crew. And it's like a throwaway line, but it says so much, right? I just love that, and the whole kind of history of Chewie and Han in the whole discussion as the gangs board the ship, and the two of them are talking to one another about talking their way out of things. I loved this whole sequence, and it is such fan service, and I love that it's fan service because this is what people wanted to see, and they gave it to us. Here's Han and Chewie 30 years later bickering like two best friends bicker.
I love even when Chewie's even agreeing with the gangs. When it was the second time, it's there was no second time. Yes, there was.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. I like the whole sequence. I also, we've had the discussion about Han shooting first, right? And how important it is that this character is a bit of a scoundrel and does have kind of a dark side to him. He's a good guy, but he's grown up in the streets and he's dark. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's a point where he literally throws one of the gangsters
into the mouth
of a Rathtar to slow the Rathtar down. Like, doesn't even hesitate. I love this. Like, it's every Han Solo for himself. That sequence, and it's pitch perfect, and I love it. And I love that it happened in the first Disney film, right? Like, it's a statement. Like, Lucas got shy of the Han shot first stuff, right? But J.J. Abrams in this sequence here says, no, Han Solo is going to take care of Han Solo. Right? And he just straight up murders this guy, throws him right into the Rathtar.
Yeah.
I think that's badass. It's fun. I also like Solo shooting Chewie's bowcaster.
It's so funny. Like, this is finally the first time he's actually using that gun.
Yeah, it's that I did find a little weird at times. I mean, I understand sometimes a person's weapon, that's their personal kind of deal. So this was his first real chance to use it. But at the same time, it has been like 30, 40 years, and he never.
Oh, I mean, their relationship's even longer than that, even. So.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but if you look at it, I mean, Han Solo's basically used the same blaster the entire time we've known him.
Yeah.
Chewie's used the same bowcaster the entire time we've known him. And, how often does somebody shoot somebody else's gun in a pressure situation? It's not
right.
Not often. And even if they did go to even if they were like shooting, essentially, beer bottles by the campfire on some planet somewhere, it's not the same as shooting somebody with it and watching them fly 40 feet. I just enjoy that whole sequence. And I like that it sets up Chewie's weapon as being something, pretty lethal. And they show it many times through the course of the film where somebody gets hit by the bowcaster and gets blasted 20, 30 feet from the hit, it's real important. We'll talk about why that's important later in the discussion. But yeah, I enjoy the whole sequence. And then I like them blasting to light speed from inside the hangar, which I thought was cool.
Yeah. Have you done that before?
Is that safe? I don't.
Is that safe? Have you say
I never asked.
Yeah, exactly.
And watching the Rathtar just kind of like disintegrate around the cockpit.
Yeah.
That was super fun.
All right,
Bryan,
I'm going to have
you
to
gotta
go.
take the kid to bed.
I got to go. Yep.
Good night, sir.
Thanks so much, guys. Talk to you later.
Later, dude.
All right, so we're introduced to Snoke here, and the supreme leader of the First Order. What do you think of Snoke, Mike?
I mean, when you first see it, you don't realize that he's a hologram. So you see this gigantic beast of a crippled old man on top of a gigantic throne. So you're like, wow, this is insane that someone is this big in the universe. But, it's Star Wars, so it's not impossible. It's interesting, the whole back and forth between Hux, Kylo, and Snoke, where Hux is clearly a military leader.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Kylo as the apprentice. And then you have Snoke. And clearly Hux and Kylo just don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. But they both respect Snoke completely. And they won't cross him, but they will, they'll have words with each other.
Right.
So that alone says that this man is very powerful. But it's an interesting look for a character. I mean, I always thought it was interesting that he has the kind of concave head scarring that like this character's been through some shit, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah, I thought the character design on Snoke was really interesting. And my only complaint is that we only saw him as a hologram.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen him as, an actual flesh and blood character in this movie. But that's a nitpick.
Yeah.
I did feel it was a bit on the nose as the First Order being kind of a bargain basement version of the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the point, though, is that it's kind of the mirror reflection of the Empire trying to crawl its way back. So with Snoke, Kylo, and Hux, you've got the Emperor, Tarkin, Vader kind of triad again.
Yep, exactly.
So,
it's been Star Wars, to the T, right?
Star Wars is always reflections of itself over and over and over again. Han telling Luke's story to Finn and Rey. Again, my notes just say some of Harrison Ford's best acting. I love that whole sequence of him talking about Luke, training a new generation of Jedi, betrayed, never saying that Kylo Ren is his kid, right? That the kid who betrayed him is his kid. It's so much the certain point of view storytelling stuff that we got with Obi-Wan, the original trilogy.
Yep.
Getting back to what we talked about when we talked about that in our discussions for those films, is like, as the older generation, you'll tell the younger generation a little bit of what happens, but it always comes from a kind of filtered perspective, designed to kind of make it easy to ingest, right?
Which, when you look back at it, that scene and the way he does that, knowing that it's his kid and it's named after Ben Kenobi, has that much more weight to it.
Yep. So they go to seek out Maz Kanata. I really loved watching Rey absorbing the color green. And that's a nice nod to Anakin saying he was cold, right, in the prequels, on his first time in space.
Yeah.
But I also really appreciated Harrison Ford's reaction to Rey saying she had no idea that there could be this much green in the universe.
Mm-hmm. It's a slight smirk, but then a little shrug.
Yeah, kind of like, oh, here we go again. Like he keeps picking up these kids from desert planets. Yeah, there's a lot of great character moments with Harrison Ford where he's not speaking in this movie, where he's just responding to people's lines that I think are just a lot of fun and say a lot about Han Solo.
Well, and the fact that he picks up on Finn so quickly. Big deal.
Well, it's interesting. I was watching some of the deleted scenes today, and there's a deleted scene down in Maz's basement where a bunch of stormtroopers come down and confront them before they can get out to the main battle. And Han Solo is just like, okay, give him your weapons, and the stormtroopers say something like, something's off with you people, whatever. And Han Solo's like, it's the boots that give it away, right? And Finn looks down and goes, "My stormtrooper boats. Is that how you could tell?" I was like, there it is. So the nature of editing films, right? Sometimes little pieces that finish off an idea end up on the cutting room floor. But yeah, there's a reason why Han Solo knew he was full of crap. It's because he's running around in stormtrooper boots still.
That's funny. Oh my God. Not just being, picking up on a guy, but yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. This is also where we get Rey's Force vision when she touches Luke/Anakin's lightsaber. There's an incredible amount of stuff to unpack in this, right? Between all the various voices that you hear Yoda, you hear Obi-Wan. You see Cloud City, right? The hallway from Cloud City.
Luke and Artoo.
You see Luke and Artoo at the burning of the Jedi Temple, which at this point we don't know the story on that at all, outside of somebody turned on him, right? We get young Rey watching a ship fly away and Unkar Plot telling her to settle down. And then we get those shots of the Knights of Ren and Kylo Ren's lightsaber stabbing somebody from behind. And Rey watching that. And then we see the forest from later in the movie where she battles Kylo Ren. And we hear Obi-Wan say, "Rey, these are your first steps." I loved that whole sequence.
I was so confused. Like I knew pieces of it, but there's so much to digest in it. Because you're right. Like I think when we saw it in theaters, you were the first person. Like, did you really? Like, I heard Yoda's, but I had no idea Obi-Wan was in there. And that's when you told me that. I was like, oh my God, it totally was.
Yeah. Well, and it was both Obi-Wans, right? Like,
yes. Yeah.
They managed to grab the piece of a word that Alec Guinness said to create Rey. And then Ewan McGregor came in and recorded, "These are your first steps."
First steps. Yep.
I just thought, wow, what a great Force vision. I mean, I love the cave in Empire, but this was so much more intense all the way around. And wraps this whole enigma of who Rey is into this, huge question mark. Why does she get this vision? And why does it show her the past and the future? Like she sees all this stuff and it's all just imagery that she doesn't understand at all. I just find it so interesting. And then to have Maz kind of talk her through it and walk her through it, I thought was really
I hope we see more of Maz and Rise. I love that character.
Well, she's in the novel that leads into Rise, which I'm only about halfway through right now, but she does play a pretty decent part in that novel. So hopefully it means she'll have a bit of screen time in the new film.
Cool.
She's such an interesting character.
Just looking at people's eyes and just judging who they are, not judging, just knowing who they could be. She is the slight, less force powerful. She's force sensitive, but she knows it.
Yeah.
Version of Yoda, essentially in this older trilogy.
Yeah. Well, and she is old like Yoda, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
She's been running her cantina for 1,000 years, right? So I think it's really interesting. She's force sensitive, but she's not a Jedi. But you got to figure if you live 1,000 years, you'll pick up some things, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, we get our glimpse of Starkiller Base. Before we get any further on that, what are your thoughts on Death Star version 3.0?
Obviously it's a little different, right? Because it's actually built into the planet and not, its own thing. The fact that we actually get to see it in action pretty quickly here is pretty cool. And that it's able to shoot multiple lasers out of one, destroying multiple planets, is just showing you how powerful it actually is. Yeah, I mean, there's still the same thing. It's like, okay, kind of seen this before. I get it. It's slightly different. So in that respect, meh. But at the same time, we actually see it actually do something. So that the other Dark Stars, we haven't actually really. I mean, yeah, the first one destroyed Alderaan. We get to see it destroy Alderaan, but yeah, this was cool.
Now, if you read the novelization, Starkiller Base had the capability of shooting through hyperspace, which is what allowed it to shoot planets remotely.
Oh, wow.
But, obviously you don't get into too much of the science of things in the films. There's just not a lot of time.
Right.
The other thing too, is that it's a planet that's rich in kyber crystals, which is how they store the energy from the star. So rather than mine kyber crystals, they just turn the planet into a giant weapon instead of creating another Death Star, like they did the first two times.
Right.
I liked the idea of turning a big planet into a giant weapon. But I also felt like it was a little bit of lazy storytelling. In the end, it's like, oh, let's just recycle the thing that got recycled once already.
Right.
But there's also a certain amount of like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is Star Wars after all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I enjoyed General Hux speaking to the troops on Starkiller Base before they fired it. I thought that was a great bit of imagery, very reminiscent of old Nazi rallies with Hitler commanding the troops from the dais. I thought it was just really well done. I mean, overall, I think from a filmmaking perspective, there's a lot of great imagery in this film. I think it's just more well executed from an image standpoint than some of the other films were.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the character Hux in this film. Last Jedi, that's different, but he just becomes a human comedic punching bag in that movie. But it's clearly someone who has power, is influential, and just hates the Republic with all his being.
Right. Yeah.
For how intense he gets in this scene, it's really well done.
Yeah. I mean, as far as him becoming a punching bag in The Last Jedi, I mean, let's not forget he oversaw the destruction of Starkiller Base. That's a pretty big fail. But that's neither here nor there. There's one shot in this film that I think is just outstanding, and it's the TIE fighters at sunset. I mean, what an image, right? It flashes me back to the old posters for like Miss Saigon.
Oh, cool. Yeah. With the helicopters. Yep.
Yeah, and Apocalypse Now and whatnot. Like, just, I like that the new filmmakers coming to Star Wars are bringing, a love of lots of film to their homages, right? And George Lucas did that in the original films. He, A New Hope was a big homage to a lot of old sci-fi serials that he grew up loving, right? So it's neat to see kind of the films of the 70s and 80s kind of being reflected now in the new trilogy. Films that they themselves, were just iconic of their day, and now they're being paid tribute to by these new filmmakers. It's really fun. Finn battling Trooper with Saber. I know some people have had issues with Finn being able to wield a lightsaber in a fight like this. But I think the thing that a lot of people have missed is if you look at those troopers, they have weapons that are designed to fight Jedi. Right. Their whole mission right now is to find Luke Skywalker. Right? They're being trained to battle Jedi who fight with lightsabers, right? So they know how to battle against a lightsaber. It would make sense that Finn and other troopers know how to pick a lightsaber up and actually use it.
Well, it's the same thing with Rey, right? Though, but it's clearly not well done. He's not fluid with it at all. But look at your childhood, right? You pick up a stick. What's the first thing you do with it? It becomes a sword.
Yeah, you swing it at people.
So it's the same exact kind of thing. Like, of course, they kind of know how to do it, but at the same time, you look at it, it's sloppy. It's just there to deflect and swing as hard as he can at the other trooper.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously he's not a Jedi,
right?
But right. I think it's believable that he can pick up a lightsaber and swing it in a battle, certainly against a trooper. So and if you again you get into the novels and stuff, especially the novelization of this movie, you get into the fact that these troopers are in fact being trained to fight Jedi. So they do have some saber training in their belt.
Oh, cool.
And obviously, their guns are designed to become those electric weapons that we saw in the prequels, so that they can stand up to a Jedi that they encounter.
Right.
My next note just reads, people have a hard time parenting in this galaxy. Obviously, I think I'm talking about Leia and Han. Yeah, I don't think you want to be a parent in that galaxy far, far away. Like, people just don't know how to be parents.
Yeah, and they each do their own thing, go their separate ways when shit hit the fan with their son, which is interesting. I mean, I kind of get Han's character doing it, but I don't know, Leia. I mean, I'm sure this, again, same thing that would probably go further in depth in a lot of the novels.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the novelizations, I mean, Lucasfilm killed off the extended universe so that they could restart the novelizations to make them canon, right? And really flow with the films. So if you're not reading the novels that are coming out currently, you are missing backstory. That's just the case. And there is a lot of backstory on Han and Leia, and the fact that Han, as much as he wants to be a good husband and be there for her, it's not his upbringing, and he's not comfortable in that life. And certainly early on, I mean, what's he going to be? This, the senator's husband, show up with her for red carpets and do what with the rest of his day? This is a man who has thrived on adventure his whole life, and not following rules and stuff, so he just felt really stifled in that life. As much as he loves Leia, he's still Han Solo. And I think it's kind of an interesting take on the character to kind of show that kind of character flaw, and I don't know that it's even a flaw, just Han Solo is Han Solo, and you try to cage a bird and break that bird's will and make them used to living in the cage, they're not quite the same bird afterwards, right?
Yep, exactly.
When you break a wild animal, you take some of the spirit away from them. And that kind of struggle for Han Solo is a key part of the character development in the novels. And the end result here is seeing where, kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, if you will, is Ben turning into Kylo and destroying the Jedi Temple, and Luke running off. Like, for a couple that are already struggling with the fact that he wants to be out in space doing fun things, how do they recover from that? It's very human, and I think that's
completely. That's
something I really appreciate about the storyline with Leia and Han in these movies, is how human they are. And yeah, sure, they did this amazing thing once upon a time and saved the galaxy, but it doesn't mean they're infallible. It doesn't mean they're perfect people. They're still flawed people, as they always were, who are just struggling to try and get through life every day, like everybody else is. So I really appreciate the storytelling there.
Yeah. And we get to see Threepio again with his red arm.
I
love the introduction.
I recognize him.
I love that. Just this nice shot between the two of them, and then all of a sudden C-3PO's head just comes in the shot. Hello! Han Solo! And then it's just a nice little, reaction, and reunion with Chewie and with Leia too. I just the hug and the look back, and I'll leave you two alone.
Right. Every best friend's been there. Yeah. So
and then you have Poe and Finn's reunion also,
right?
Which was great. The fact that and this is where you see BB-8 see Poe first and just runs, rolls as fast as he can to get to him, and that's the dog and master where it's Poe is generally happy to see BB-8, and then looks up and sees Finn and the jacket, and well, it looks better on you. Keep it. It's a good bromance that you can see happening.
Totally. The bromance between Finn and Poe is fun. Again, it's fun. There's joy. Yep. There's joy in these characters. I love the joy. If they're fighting for something, they should be fighting for a life filled with joy, right? So it's nice to see characters who have that in them.
Oh, I have one note quick on the going back to this. I love the shooting and the editing that they did with that battle. There's a great shot of following Poe in his X-wing. That it just follows. He destroys 2 or 3 TIE fighters and then goes down, and then it follows a couple of stormtroopers that are getting blown up, and then goes all in one shot to Finn and go, that's one hell of a pilot. Like, there's so much really good transitional stuff in a lot of this movie that sometimes wasn't really done in the other films.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the same thing though, like the cinematography and the paying attention to a lot of that stuff and homage to older films. It's a little different style than we're used to, but I think it helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Kylo interrogates Rey. Thus far, Kylo Ren really hasn't had to deal with much in the way of force sensitive people, right? Like, there's no Jedi really. Luke's run off. He killed or converted the people who were at the Jedi Academy with him. So how often has he tried to interrogate a force sensitive person who could maybe fight back, right? Granted, Rey doesn't know what she's doing, but you know, when your life is on the line and you're being pressured, sometimes instinct just kicks in, right? And the natural abilities to do things kind of present themselves. At least that's how I view this scene, right?
Yeah, it's fight or flight, right? You're either going to run away from it or you're going to rise to it and just take it on. Yeah.
I've read some theories around too, and I can't remember if it's in the novels or not, but there's theories that go around that when Rey tapped into the mind of Kylo Ren, there was a bit of a data dump from him of training and force abilities, which opens her up to being able to just a few moments later, like, make an attempt at mind control.
Yep.
On the Daniel Craig Stormtrooper, by the way.
Yes, it is.
But I think that's a really interesting idea. This idea that, you know, she kind of instinctually tapped back into his mind, and with him not knowing that was going to happen, like his, you know, like she broke through and some of him just kind of downloaded in. Kind of an interesting idea. Helps kind of fill in some gaps, I think, on why suddenly a couple minutes later she's trying to do mind control with nobody ever showing her that's a thing she could do before.
or hearing about it or whatever. Yeah, that right.
Yeah. So it's been a while since I read the novelization. I can't remember if that was in the novel or not. We also get the scene when she breaks free and Kylo comes back to the interrogation room. He throws another tantrum. This is where we get to see the troopers like stop in the hallway, kind of see the stuff flying out of the doorway and just kind of turn around and go, nope. Wander off.
That's I love that. This is where the comedic part comes in. And again, this is us in the theaters just busting up because we're just like, oh my God. Okay, troopers actually have nope, I'm not gonna touch that right now.
Yeah. Let's go over there.
No. Let's patrol this.
And I know one of those guys was Michael Giacchino.
Oh, cool.
I can't remember.
I knew about Daniel Craig. I didn't know about that.
Can't remember who the other one was in that pairing, but yeah, it's pretty funny.
Rogue came out after this, right?
Yeah, this was the start of everything.
Yeah.
Start of everything.
So it's nice. It was nice to put him in there because he's doing the music for Rogue One.
Yeah, but I mean, he's done the music for J.J. Abrams for years. So
right.
The next note I've got, so I skip ahead a little bit, you know, because we get a lot of exposition about Starkiller Base and how they're going to take it down, whatever. Landing approach at light speed. Han Solo is crazy. You know, I love the bit. I love the bit where he turns to Leia. She's like, "How are you going to get past the shields?" He's like, "I tell you, but you wouldn't like it."
I am amazed at how much the Millennium Falcon can take. Because, man, that thing gets beat up. No wonder he's always fixing it.
Right? Well, yeah, I mean, it does kind of like stretch believability a little bit. You know, the idea that he ends up flying through an entire forest and crashes in the snow. That the thing could ever fly again, but it's fun. And I'm willing to look past it. So, I love the exchange between Finn and Han Solo. When Finn says, "I don't know any of that. I'm just here to save Rey." And Han's like, there's people relying on us. There's people the galaxy is counting on us. He goes, "We'll use the Force." That's not how the Force works.
And then Chewie, "I'm cold." "Oh, you're cold?"
You're cold. There's just so many little character beats like that I love, and it's so on point and more original trilogy style character moments than what we had in the prequels. You know, the prequels had very few of these kinds of beats. And I really appreciate them in The Force Awakens.
Well, and I think part of that too is when you're doing a prequel, right? You already know these characters, or at least some of their characteristics, right? So you're especially like, you know, when you're looking at like Obi-Wan, right? You know what that character is. So you see him, the evolution. So you kind of expect him to go a certain way. You expect Vader to kind of go a little ways. Padme, if she's anything like her mom, you kind of have a character idea. This, besides having, you know, your returnees, Rey and Finn and Poe are completely new characters that you can do whatever you want with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of nice that you have that little bit of freedom and to play off of the old comedic bits of the original.
Right.
In this case.
Yeah, totally. I agree. Han confronts Kylo Ren because Leia told him to. So Leia sent him to die. I like this whole exchange between the two of them. And Han really does seem to be trying desperately to reach his son here. But Kylo goes and kills his own father. Can there be redemption for him after that? That's the big question. There's a faction of the fan base that would love to see Kylo Ren redeemed, right? I think they call it Bendemption.
Oh, that's funny. I've never heard that one.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I would like to see Ben Solo redeemed, but only if it's through sacrifice. I think that's the only way the character can redeem himself.
Basically like Vader.
Yeah. I don't think there's a universe that would allow for Kylo Ren to end up with Rey, like, for the rest of his life, you know, like for the shippers out there who are, you know, hoping for what do they call it? A Reylo.
Putting the two names together.
Yeah, you know, I can't see that as an acceptable outcome. The guy killed Han Solo in cold blood. You know, like, the only way he can redeem himself is to trade his life to save others now. Like, I just don't see how you can justify that character any other way. I mean, aside from the fact that he's killed a ton of people already, but there's something personal about killing your father, especially Han Solo, that makes it, you know, damn near impossible for me to see any redemption for the character going forward. Heartbreaking to watch Chewie watch Han Solo die. And he takes his bowcaster out and shoots Kylo Ren, right? Now, this is where I was making the point before about how powerful that bowcaster is. He shoots Kylo Ren right in the gut, right?
And barely moves him.
Kylo barely moves and then goes on to have, big lightsaber battles with Finn and Rey, right? And I wanted to make sure we made this point. That bowcaster is super powerful. Kylo Ren took a nasty, life-threatening hit. The only reason he didn't fall off the platform or die is he's absorbing dark side energy to keep his shit together.
Yep.
And he's weak when he fights Finn, and he's weaker when he fights Rey. Because Finn gets a blade on his arm.
In the shoulder.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Kylo's barely holding it together. It's only the fact that he is as strong with the Force that he's even walking. And you can see him like doing the pounding thing on his gut. Like he's just, trying to keep it all freaking inside, So I just wanted to make sure we made that point. Kylo Ren, yes, Rey did something extraordinary to beat him, and Finn did something extraordinary to stand up to him, but they were not fighting a fully fleshed out Kylo Ren at that point. They're fighting a guy who's literally tapping into dark side energy just to stay alive.
Yep, exactly.
So, I love the moment where Rey, who said, I never want to touch that lightsaber again, to Maz, wakes up, sees Finn in trouble, and it's at this point that she finally accepts her destiny to save her friend. Right? And at that moment, that's when the saber flies to her hand instead of Kylo's, right? She's stepping into that unknown world that she caught a glimpse of earlier in the film that scared her. Now she's accepting that she's part of something bigger, and she's got to step up, or Finn's done for. And so she steps in to take care of her friend by facing her fear, which I think is cool.
There's so much good lighting and cinematography in these last couple scenes.
Oh, heck yeah.
From where Kylo Han and Kylo, and the light coming in, just a little bit of light coming in from the last little bit of that sun coming in over the face, and then it goes away, and then he's completely in dark.
Oh, and we saw that. We saw the sun vanishing in Rey's vision. Yep. Right. Yeah, and so so Rey recognized that when she was up on the platform. She saw that sun blink out. She's like, I've seen this before.
And then just the contrast with the snow, the trees, and just the classic blue and red colors. That's all you see in this, and it's awesome. But I love the one little difference in a lot of this is Kylo's saber with the flickering and the sounds that you hear out of it.
Yeah, the fact that it's got a broken kyber crystal.
Yep. And especially when Rey's got it right there in her vision, right there in her face, and she closes her eyes and then tries to focus, and then her eyes open. The color in her eyes is so stunning. This entire scene, I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of art in the framing and in the coloring and in the reflections on her eyes. Like, there's so much about this movie that I just find to be beautiful. Like, it's for me, I think it's the prettiest Star Wars film. As a filmmaker, I think it's just a gorgeous movie across the board. And I really appreciate it. Yeah, then Chewbacca saves the day. Gets Rey and Finn off planet. I love that lighting too of the Falcon's headlights blasting through the tree trunks.
Yep.
And the shifting shadows as she looks up and realizes what it is. Just beautiful. There's so many beautiful scenes like that in this movie. Chewie and Leia are sad. I like the character moments, the quiet character moments, the two of them just sitting in the control area for the Resistance, being sad. I know a lot of people complain that there wasn't a lot of mourning for the loss of Han Solo.
But these characters don't really know him. He's been gone for...
Well,
beside
yeah, he hasn't been a part of the Resistance for sure.
Exactly.
And he gave up his commission as a general in the Republic ages ago. But on top of that too, it's like, how sad can you, like, how can you focus on just Han Solo at this point when those 5 other planets got destroyed too, right? Like, there's a lot of loss at this point in this movie. And I think it's easy to forget because we didn't really know anybody on those 5 planets, but these quiet moments are about more than just Han Solo. I mean, it is Han Solo, but they've lost a lot at this point. The New Republic is completely in shambles, right? Like, everything they were meant to protect is gone. So it's a tough time. But I like the quiet moment with Chewie and the quiet moment with Leia, before Artoo wakes up randomly.
Yep.
And presents them with the map. How excited were you to see Luke Skywalker?
Obviously very. Was it the last 20 seconds of the film? Wasn't quite expecting that.
I mean, I gotta say it. I was impressed that J.J. Abrams did that.
Right?
Like, with all the hype about Mark Hamill coming back to be Luke Skywalker and all the kind of, fandom going crazy over the original trilogy characters coming back, to only show Luke Skywalker for 20 seconds at the end of the movie, man, that takes balls. That takes balls. But I personally, I loved it also because I liked this idea of old hermit Luke who took off when shit hit the fan, because that's exactly what his masters did.
Right,
that's what Obi-Wan did. That's what Yoda did. We'll get into kind of the fallout of that character decision in The Last Jedi when we talk about that in a couple of days. But for me, it felt character appropriate to finally find Luke in this solitary place. And he looks unhappy that Rey is there, at all. And I loved this idea of old hermit Luke, and the speculation that I had about it for the next couple of years was a lot of fun. It sets up an interesting starting point for The Last Jedi, that's for sure.
Absolutely. It was it's a good ride. I mean, overall, like you said, this movie is incredibly fun. And it's just to get you back, and hey, Star Wars has been gone for 30 years. Let's bring it back home. And
it's rewatchable, right?
Right. Absolutely.
One of the complaints I have about the prequels is, by and large, they're not incredibly rewatchable.
They've got moments, but that's about it.
They have moments, and I would say that the third one is probably the closest to being a rewatchable movie of the three of them. And the original trilogy, I think, is highly rewatchable. But again, if your movie-going tastes have shifted over the years, as many people have, to a faster paced story, to, kind of everything coming at you a lot quicker, the original trilogy can feel really slow to watch. because it was all done pre-digital editing and pre-digital filmmaking. So cuts are slower and scenes are allowed to kind of exist on a single camera for longer periods of time.
Right.
So, kind of younger film goers aren't used to slower movies necessarily. The things they grow up watching now are YouTube and TikTok and Snapchat, and they're used to things coming at them super fast and information being presented really quickly. And I think The Force Awakens kind of does a good job of paying tribute to the original trilogy while also bringing that kind of spirit of adventure and the style of filmmaking to current audience tastes. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
So, yeah. So I loved it. And Mike, thanks for making the time again, all the way in Florida. I know you were like hanging out by a pool or something today.
It was nice after a couple days straight in parks. It's nice to just, do nothing. Well worth it.
Yeah. Well, we are, let's see, today's Sunday, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we are 4 days from watching Rise of Skywalker. So you think you can make some time on Wednesday to do Last Jedi?
Potentially? I'm going to try.
Okay, well, one way or the other, some of the Sci-Fi Sunday crew will get together likely on Wednesday to podcast about The Last Jedi before we watch The Rise of Skywalker on Thursday, the 19th. Yes, we are on the early screenings on the 19th. And
so stoked.
We will podcast that night a bit of non-spoiler coverage, and then likely followed by a ton of spoilery coverage in the same episode. So be sure to tune in all this week as we round out and finish up the run up to the Rise of Skywalker with our Last Jedi review, and then our night of the opening Rise of Skywalker review. Until then, I've been sitting with my good buddy
Mike Peterson.
I'm David Dawson, and you've been listening to Sci-Fi Sunday. We'll catch you again very, very soon.